Imagine sending your kid to school and getting a call that a teacher shaved her head without permission. What would you do? It started on a Wednesday morning in Shreveport, Louisiana. The sun was already beating down heavy, warming the sidewalks and bouncing light off the windows of Jefferson Middle School. Kids shuffled in through the front doors, backpacks slung over their shoulders, sneakers squeaking on the floors. 12-year-old Imani Wells walked in just like she did every other day, head held high, backpack snug against her small frame, and her natural curls pulled up into a neat puff that her mom had helped her style before sunrise. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was hers, and to her, it felt like wearing a crown. Imani loved school, even if sometimes it felt like she had to work twice as hard to be seen and heard. She was quiet but sharp, the type of kid who didn't cause trouble but somehow still got noticed, and not always in a good way. Her first 2 classes went by without much fuss. Science was fine, math was boring, and she had just started doodling in the margins of her notebook when she noticed Miss Karen Whitmore staring at her. Not the usual pay-attention kind of look, something different, something uncomfortable. At first, Imani brushed it off, tucking a loose curl behind her ear and focusing on the board. But when the bell rang, instead of letting the students pour out into the hallway, Miss Whitmore called her name. "Imani, stay for a moment, please." Her stomach dropped a little. She wasn't sure why. She hadn't done anything wrong. She zipped up her pencil case and walked over to Miss Whitmore's desk. The woman leaned in, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel secretive, but sharp enough that the few kids still packing up could catch every word. "Your hair," Miss Whitmore said, pinching the air above Imani's head like it was dirty. "It's getting too messy. It's a distraction to others. You need to do something about it." Imani blinked, confused. Her hands instinctively touched her hair. She had just fixed it this morning. What was wrong with it? I thought it was fine," she stammered. "It's not. I'm going to help you fix it," Ms. Whitmore said, already rising from her chair like it was settled. "Come with me." Imani hesitated. She glanced at the clock, thinking about how she was supposed to meet her friends for lunch, but she followed because that's what you did when an adult told you to do something at school. They walked down the hallway past classroom after classroom until they reached the nurse's office. Ms. Whitmore knocked, and when no one answered, she pulled a key off her lanyard and opened the door herself. Inside, it smelled like disinfectant and paper towels. In the corner was a metal cabinet with basic supplies, Band-Aids, cotton balls, and tucked into the bottom shelf, an old pair of hair clippers. Imani's eyes widened. "Sit," Ms. Whitmore said, patting the vinyl cot. "Wait, what are you doing?" Imani asked, her voice cracking. "Relax. It's just a little cleanup." "You'll thank me later," Miss Whitmore said, grabbing the clippers like she'd been waiting for this moment. Imani sat frozen, too scared to run, too shocked to think. The clippers buzzed to life with a loud WH. Miss Whitmore didn't even pause. She pressed them against Amon's head and began shaving. Imani felt the cold metal scrape across her scalp, followed by the horrible sound of her hair falling onto the floor. Chunk after chunk, her curls dropped away, and with them, something inside her crumbled too. Whitmore wasn't careful. She wasn't gentle. She shaved random patches, leaving jagged spots that made it look like an accident, a punishment. When she finally turned the clippers off, the room was silent, except for Imani's shallow breathing. Her hands shook as she touched her head, feeling the raw, uneven patches. "There," Ms. Whitmore said briskly. "Much better. Now you won't distract anyone." Imani didn't speak. She couldn't. But the worst part wasn't even over yet, because what happened next would bring someone through those school doors that no one in that building was ready for. Ms. Whitmore seemed almost proud of herself as she wiped the clippers clean with a tissue and shoved them back into the cabinet, like she had just crossed something off her to-do list. She didn't even look at Imani again. "Go on back to class," she said, waving her hand like Imani was just another errand she had finished. Imani stood up slowly, her legs wobbling a little. She could feel the stairs before she even stepped into the hallway. 2 kids walking past stopped and gawked. One of them let out a low whistle and whispered something to his friend, who snickered. Imani dropped her head and hurried down the hallway, clutching the straps of her backpack like they were the only things keeping her upright. When she slid into her next class, the teacher barely looked at her, but the kids did, eyes wide, whispers starting to ripple across the room like a wildfire. Sheesh. Eared snippets. What happened to her hair? Did she lose a bet? Was it for a dare? Amani kept her eyes on her desk. Her scalp stung, both from the clippers and from shame. But Ms. Whitmore, she didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she didn't care. Either way, she continued with her day like nothing had happened. That was when Amani realized something deep and ugly. She wasn't supposed to fight back. She wasn't supposed to say anything. She was supposed to sit there humiliated and let it be normal. But she couldn't. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone under the desk, breaking school rules without a second thought. Her fingers typed fast, desperate, trying not to cry. "Mama, please come get me. Please. Something bad happened, please." She hit send and slid the phone back into her lap, just as the teacher turned back toward the class. Across town at the Barksdale Air Force Base, Colonel Danielle Wells was midway through a meeting with her commanding officer when her phone buzzed against the table. She glanced down at the screen, expecting some routine update or maybe a reminder. Instead, she saw the message from her daughter. Danielle's heart dropped. She didn't think. She didn't apologize. She didn't wait for permission. She stood up, grabbed her uniform jacket from the back of her chair, and was out the door in seconds. In the parking lot, she slid into her SUV, hands tight around the steering wheel, breathing heavy. It wasn't just the worry of a mother. It was the burning rage of a woman who had seen real battles, who had spent her life protecting others, only to realize her own daughter wasn't safe at a place that was supposed to protect her. Back at the school, Aman. I sat in her seat, eyes blurry, waiting for her mom, waiting for something to make this nightmare end. But she had no idea that her mother wasn't coming quietly. And when she arrived, everything would shift in a way no one could have prepared for. The minutes felt like hours. Amani sat stiff in her chair, the noise around her fading into a low murmur. Every time someone snickered or whispered, she felt like shrinking smaller and smaller into her seat. She kept tugging at the ends of her sleeves, wishing she could somehow cover her head, hide the raw patches left behind. When the bell finally rang, she didn't move. Kids rushed past her, some staring out right now, others pretending not to look, but sneaking glances anyway. It felt like the whole school knew, like everyone could see the pieces of her that had been taken away. Her friends, if they even were her friends, stayed quiet. No one came over to check on her. No one asked if she was okay. Amani sat there blinking hard, trying not to cry again. She told herself she could make it until her mom got there, just a little longer. Meanwhile, outside, Colonel Danielle Wells was pulling into the visitors' lot at Jefferson Middle School. She didn't bother parking neatly. She threw the gear into park, stepped out of the car, and adjusted her uniform jacket. It wasn't just for show. She hadn't had time to change, and she didn't want to. Let them see her medals. Let them see her stripes. Let them see exactly who they were about to deal with. Danielle walked up the front steps, her boots striking the concrete with steady, purposeful steps. When she opened the front doors, the woman behind the front desk barely had time to look up before Danielle was already speaking. "I'm here for my daughter, Amani Wells. Where is she?" The receptionist flinched at the tone, fumbling for her computer. She's in class right now. What's the issue?" "My daughter contacted me directly. I need to speak with her now," Danielle said, her voice cold enough to make the woman's hands shake. The receptionist nodded quickly and picked up the phone, calling down to the classroom. But Danielle wasn't waiting. She stepped through the main office door, scanning the hallways like she was assessing a battlefield. Back in class, Amani heard the announcement over the intercom. "Amani Wells, please come to the front office. Your mother is here." The whole room turned to look at her. Some kids snickered. Some whispered. One girl in the back mouthed, "You're in trouble." Amani didn't care. She grabbed her backpack and bolted from her seat. She pushed through the hallways, her heart pounding harder with every step until she turned the corner. And there, standing like a statue carved from stone, was her mother for the first time all day. Amani felt like she could breathe. She ran straight into her mother's arms, burying her face in Danielle's chest. Danielle knelt down, lifting Amani's chin gently to look at her. And when she saw her daughter's patchy, butchered hair, something inside her snapped. Her mouth tightened into a thin line. She kissed the top of Imani's head and stood up. "Who did this?" she asked, voice low and dangerous. Imani swallowed hard. "My teacher, Miss Whitmore." Danielle nodded once, sharp, precise, the way she would before walking into a hostile zone. "Show me." Imani took her mother's hand and together they started walking toward the classroom. But when Danielle Wells reached that door, she wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a force that no one in that school could ignore. The hallway was dead silent, except for the sound of Danielle's boots hitting the floor. Each step felt louder than the last, echoing off the walls, bouncing off the lockers. Kids poked their heads out of classrooms. Teachers paused mid-sentence. Even the assistant principal stepped into the hall, but one look at Danielle's face, and he quickly backed up without a word. Imani led her to room 213, Miss Whitmore's class. Danielle didn't knock. She didn't wait for permission. She pushed the door open with one firm hand and stepped inside. Miss Whitmore, standing by the whiteboard, froze mid-word. The chatter in the classroom dropped to zero. Every single pair of eyes locked onto the tall woman in uniform, her medals glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Danielle scanned the room, locking eyes with Miss Whitmore. "You," she said, voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Miss Whitmore's face turned pale. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She took one tiny, useless step back. Danielle stepped forward. "My name is Colonel Danielle Wells," she said, her voice sharp but even. "I am the mother of the child you decided to put your hands on today." Miss Whitmore's mouth worked, trying to form some excuse, but Danielle didn't give her the chance. "You cut her hair without permission. You touched my child without my consent. You humiliated her," Danielle said. Each word deliberate, measured, steady. Some kids gasped. Some just sat there wide-eyed, staring like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. I thought it would help," Miss Whitmore stammered finally, wringing her hands. Her appearance, her hair, it was causing disruptions. "You decided my daughter's natural hair was a problem," Danielle snapped, taking another step closer. "You decided to punish her for it." Miss Whitmore's voice shrank. I didn't mean you didn't think Danielle cut her off. You acted out of ignorance. You acted out of arrogance. And you did it thinking no one would challenge you." Silence. Absolute heavy silence. Danielle looked around the room at all the kids staring at her daughter sitting stiffly in the front row, her hands trembling slightly on her desk. Then Danielle turned her gaze back to Miss Whitmore. "You owe my daughter an apology right here, right now." Miss Whitmore's face twisted. Whether from shame, guilt, or just the raw fear of being exposed, nobody knew. She stumbled over her words. I'm sorry, Imani," she said, voice. Imani didn't respond. She didn't have to. Danielle gave a small nod, and after today, she added, her voice low and final, "You'll be answering to more than just me." But just as Danielle turned to leave with her daughter, the situation took another turn because someone else was about to get involved and things were far from over. As Danielle guided Imani toward the door, the assistant principal, Mr. Lelhart, appeared in the hallway, flanked by two security officers. His face was flushed, either from rushing or pure panic. "Colonel, please," he said, throwing up his hands. "We can handle this. There's no need to escalate." Danielle turned slowly to face him. Her posture was calm, almost casual, but her eyes were anything but. "You should have handled it the moment your teacher decided to assault my daughter," she said. "Now it's too late for you to run cleanup." Hart shifted awkwardly, adjusting his tie. Let's go to the conference room," he suggested, voice a little too eager. "We can talk it out." Imani clutched her mother's hand tighter. Danielle squeezed back, reassuring her without a word. They followed Hart down the hallway. The two security officers trailed behind them, glancing at each other, unsure if they were supposed to intervene. Inside the conference room, it was cold, the kind of cold that seeped into your skin. Danielle sat down but didn't take off her jacket. She wanted every stripe, every medal, every piece of who she was to be seen. Hart cleared his throat, shuffling papers, even though he hadn't written anything down. "Kono," he started, trying for a calming tone. We deeply regret what happened today. I want you to know this is not how we run things at Jefferson Middle School." Danielle didn't blink. "Save the PR speech," she said. "I'm here to discuss one thing. What you're going to do to make this right." Hart opened his mouth, closed it again. He wasn't ready for this kind of directness. He stumbled into a pile of half-promises. Internal investigations, teacher suspension, maybe some sensitivity training. Danielle waited for him to finish. Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. "You will suspend Miss Whitmore immediately," she said. "You will issue a public apology to my daughter. You will review your staff's conduct policies, and you will ensure that every child who walks into this building knows that their culture, their hair, their identity is not something they should have to defend." Hart swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "If you don't," Danielle added, "I have no problem filing a lawsuit, personal and professional, and I will bring the media with me every step of the way." Hart sat back in his chair, defeated. "Of course," he mumbled. We'll do everything you ask." Imani watched quietly from her seat, a lump in her throat. Her mother wasn't just fighting for her. She was fighting for every kid who ever felt small, overlooked, or punished just for being themselves. Danielle stood, reaching for Imani's hand again. "We're done here," she said, leading her daughter out of the room. As they walked down the hallway, teachers peeked out from their classrooms, pretending not to stare. Some students whispered, but this time it wasn't mockery. It was respect. It was awe. It was the kind of attention that came when someone finally stood up and said, "Enough." But even after they left that building, Danielle knew the real fight was just beginning, and this time she wasn't planning to do it quietly. The next morning it was on the local news. By afternoon it was all over the internet. Photos of Imani's butchered hair, clips of Colonel Wells standing proud in her uniform, articles quoting witnesses who said they'd never seen anything like it at Jefferson Middle School. People had a lot to say. Some were outraged, calling for Miss Whitmore's immediate firing. Some tried to defend the school, saying it was just a misunderstanding. But no matter how anyone tried to spin it, the truth stayed the same. A teacher had humiliated a 12-year-old black girl because she didn't like the way she looked. And a mother, strong, fierce, unshakable, had refused to let it be swept under the rug. The school board called an emergency meeting. This time parents packed the gymnasium. Reporters hovered outside, and news cameras flashed every time Danielle spoke. She stood tall at the microphone, Imani by her side. "My daughter's hair is not a distraction," Danielle said, her voice carrying to the very back of the room. "Her blackness is not something that needs to be fixed. It's something that should be celebrated, respected, and protected." Applause broke out. Some parents wiped tears from their eyes. Some students nodded fiercely, finally feeling seen. Ms. Whitmore resigned a week later. The district announced new policies about student appearance, not to police it, but to protect it. Teachers and staff were required to undergo training about cultural sensitivity, personal boundaries, and respect. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a start. And for Imani, something bigger had changed too. She wasn't just the quiet girl anymore. She walked a little taller now, even when her hair was still growing back in. She knew what it felt like to be hurt, but she also knew what it felt like to be defended loudly, fiercely, without apology. That knowledge would stay with her forever. And if you take anything from their story, let it be this. Never let anyone decide that you are too much or not enough because of who you are. Your identity, your roots, your pride, they are not distractions. They are your power. Stand tall, speak up, protect your crown. If you believe stories like Imani's need to be heard, shared, and remembered, make sure you speak up wherever you are. One voice can make a difference, but together we can change everything.